Jasper Wild had been looking at the same piece of paper for 3 straight days. It wasn't a map. Not really. It was more like a dying man's fever dream, scratched onto the back of an old receipt. His grandfather, Ed, had left it for him. Numbers that didn't add up. Directions that seemed to loop back on themselves. A strange, spidery symbol drawn in the center. For 72 hours it was just junk. A piece of trash left behind by a man whose mind was fading. Until today. Today the numbers clicked. The directions straightened out. And Jasper found himself standing at the mouth of a long-abandoned mine. The desert sun beating down on his neck. The place felt wrong. The danger do not enter signs were so old the paint was peeling off in sun-bleached curls. They looked like they'd been there for 100 years. But the tracks in the dirt were fresh. Wagon wheels. And not the old rickety kind from a local rancher. These were heavy, deep grooves. Someone had been here recently. Someone with money. He saw cigarette butts on the ground, not yet bleached white by the sun. This was all wrong. His grandfather had always told him this mine was collapsed, forgotten, a relic of a failed silver rush from half a century ago, a place to stay away from. So why had he left Jasper a map leading right to its front door? Jasper pulled out his flashlight, its beam a weak yellow spear against the overwhelming darkness. He took a breath, the air already thick with the smell of dust and decay, and stepped inside. The descent was steep, 10 feet down, 20 feet. The temperature dropped like a stone. The air changed. It didn't smell like a collapsed mine. It smelled like metal, old, rusted metal, and something else underneath it. Something sickly sweet, like old meat left too long in the sun. He ran a hand along the tunnel wall. It was smooth. Too smooth. An old pickaxe mine should have jagged, rough-hewn walls. This felt like it had been bored out by a machine. A modern machine. That's when his light found the first skeleton. It was sitting upright, its back against the tunnel wall, still dressed in the tattered remains of a work shirt. It wasn't a collapsed pile of bones like you'd expect after decades of decay. It was positioned, placed there, like a macabre decoration in a house of horrors. Jasper's hand started to shake, the flashlight beam trembling with it. He swept the light further down the tunnel, and his heart stopped. There was another one, and another, and another. A neat row of 7 skeletons, all sitting upright against the wall, as if they were waiting for a train that would never come. Jasper felt a scream building in his throat, but it wouldn't come out. His breath was trapped in his lungs. This wasn't a gravesite. This was a statement. But that wasn't what made the blood in his veins turn to ice. That wasn't the detail that would haunt his dreams for the rest of his life. Around each skeleton's neck, hanging from a rusted chain, was a small metal tag. And on every single tag, stamped deep into the metal, was the exact same spidery symbol his grandfather had scratched onto that piece of paper. The same symbol that was carved into the stone mantelpiece above the fireplace back at the family home. A symbol he had seen every single day of his life and never once questioned. He raised his camera, his hands trembling so badly he could barely focus. He had to document this. He didn't know why, but some instinct screamed at him that this was bigger than just old bones in a forgotten hole. He photographed the skeletons, the tags, the smooth walls of the tunnel. Each click of the shutter sounded like a gunshot in the dead silence. As he worked his way down the line, he saw something glinting on the floor near the last skeleton. He knelt down, his light catching the brass of a spent shell casing. It wasn't old and corroded. It was shiny, fresh. Someone hadn't just been here recently. Someone had fired a gun down here. Very, very recently. A noise echoed from deeper in the mine. A scraping sound. Rock against rock. Jasper froze, every muscle in his body screaming. He wasn't alone. He didn't wait to find out who or what was making that sound. He turned and ran, scrambling back up the incline, his boots slipping on the loose gravel. The images of those 7 smiling skeletons burned into his mind. He burst out of the mine, gasping for air, his eyes blinded by the sudden assault of the desert sun. And that's when he saw them. 3 dark, expensive-looking wagons were parked right where he had stood just minutes before. Standing beside them as out of place as snow in July were three men in dark suits. They weren't looking at the mine. They were looking directly at him. One of them, a man with cold, calculating eyes and a smile that didn't reach them, took a step forward. "You must be Ed Hollister's grandson," the man said. His voice was calm, conversational, as if they'd arranged to meet here. "We've been waiting for you." Jasper's heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. He clutched the camera to his chest, the metal still cool from the underground air. He counted three powerful-looking horses tied to the wagons, their coats gleaming in the sun. These weren't local ranch hands. These were city men, dangerous men. "I don't know what you're talking about," Jasper stammered, his voice cracking. The lie felt pathetic and thin in the vast emptiness of the desert. The man in the lead, the one with the dead eyes, took another step closer. His polished boots crunched on the gravel. "Your grandfather, Ed, was a smart man," the man said, his eyes flicking from Jasper's face to the camera in his hands. "He kept his mouth shut for 37 years. We respected that. A deal is a deal, after all." He paused, letting the silence hang in the air. "But he left you something, didn't he? A little piece of paper." How? How could they possibly know? His grandfather had died in his sleep. Jasper had found the note himself, tucked away inside Ed's old mining helmet in the back of a dusty closet. No one else had been there. No one else could have known. Unless his grandfather's death wasn't as peaceful as the doctor had said. "The thing about secrets, boy," another man spoke up, his voice rougher, "is they have a way of getting out. Your grandfather started talking in his final days, getting sentimental. We had to help him along." The casual cruelty of the words hit Jasper like a physical blow. His grandfather hadn't just died. He'd been murdered. And these were the men who did it. Jasper's grief and fear curdled into a hot, boiling rage. "What do you want?" Jasper asked, his voice low and steady now. The first man smiled that cold, dead smile again. "What you saw down there. Those men. They worked for an associate of ours, a long time ago. They were hired to do a job, a simple mining survey. But they got greedy. They found something they weren't supposed to find. Something that would have destroyed a lot of important people." Jasper thought of the skeletons, sitting in their perfect silent row. "You killed them." "We contained a security leak," the man corrected him smoothly. "And now the question is whether you're as smart as your grandfather was, or if we need to add another Hollister to our collection." The man reached into his coat pocket. He didn't pull out a gun. He pulled out something far more terrifying. It was a metal tag, identical to the ones Jasper had just photographed. It wasn't old or rusted. It was brand new, gleaming in the harsh sunlight. Engraved on its surface in sharp, precise letters was Jasper's name. Jasper stared at his own name, carved into the cold metal. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment threat. This was planned. They had this tag made before he ever even left his ranch. They hadn't just been waiting for him today. They had been watching him. The realization sent a fresh wave of terror through him. "Your grandfather was a creature of habit," the man said, as if reading his mind. He tucked the tag back into his pocket. "He taught you everything he knew. How to read the land, how to follow a trail. He taught you so well, we knew that if he left you a trail, you'd be smart enough to follow it. He led you right to us." It couldn't be true. His grandfather wouldn't do that. He wouldn't lead him into a trap. Jasper's mind raced, replaying the last few weeks. The hushed conversations that would stop the moment he walked into a room. The way his mother kept inventing chores for him, trying to keep him close to the ranch. The strangers who had come by, asking to buy Ed's old tools. His personal effects, leaving empty-handed and angry. They weren't buyers. They were searching. Searching for the map. "My grandfather never told me a thing," Jasper insisted, his voice trembling again. "No, but he left you that paper, didn't he?" The second man chimed in, his hand now resting on the butt of a pistol tucked into his waistband. "Which leads us to the next question. What else did he leave you?" Jasper's stomach plummeted. The camera. They hadn't seen him go in with it. They didn't know about the photographs. It was the only card he had left to play. I'm going to make you an offer, son, the first man said, his tone shifting, becoming almost friendly. The same offer we made your grandfather 37 years ago. You give us the camera, you burn that little piece of paper, you go home and you forget everything you saw today. You forget this conversation ever happened. In return, your family stays safe. Your mother keeps her ranch, keeps her water rights. Ed's generous pension continues to arrive every month like clockwork. The threat was unmistakable, wrapped in a thin veneer of civility. Lose your memory, or your mother loses everything. Jasper looked past them, toward the dark, gaping mouth of the mine. He thought of the 7 men down there. Had they been given the same choice? Had they refused to forget? What were they looking for? Jasper asked, his voice barely a whisper. What was so important you'd kill 7 men to keep it secret? The men exchanged a look. A silent conversation passed between them, and Jasper knew he was on the edge of a cliff. The answer to his question would either save him or get him killed. Information, the first man said finally. The most valuable commodity on Earth. Names, dates, transactions. Evidence of things that powerful men paid a great deal of money to keep buried. Evidence of what? Jasper pressed, his courage growing. The man's expression hardened. Land deals that weren't quite legal. Water rights that were reappropriated. Families who were driven off their land by methods that weren't strictly civilized. He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Your grandfather wasn't just a foreman. He was the bookkeeper. He recorded everything. Every name, every dollar, every shallow grave. Jasper felt the weight of the camera in his hands. It suddenly felt heavier than a block of stone. He wasn't just carrying pictures of bones. He was carrying proof. Proof that could bring down an empire built on murder and theft. An empire that was still very much in business. There's more, isn't there? Jasper said, a horrifying thought dawning on him. It's not all in the past. The man's predatory smile returned. Smart boy. Your grandfather's records didn't stop in 1920. They went all the way up to last year. And now that he's gone, you're the only person on Earth who might know where he kept the rest of it. Behind them, one of the horses whinnied, stamping its foot nervously. Jasper heard it then, a sound cutting through the desert silence, the rhythmic beat of approaching hooves. Someone else was coming, and they were coming fast. The hoofbeats belonged to a single rider, pushing their horse hard across the dry, cracked earth. As the rider drew closer, Jasper recognized the powerful bay mare before he could make out the face of the person in the saddle. It was Cora Lane. Cora ran the general store in town, a woman who seemed to be made of leather and secrets, who always knew everything that happened in the county before anyone else did. The 3 men in suits turned as one, their easy confidence vanishing in an instant. The man Jasper now knew as Noah tensed up, his hand drifting instinctively toward the gun inside his coat. Easy, Noah, Cora called out, her voice clear and sharp as she reined in her horse about 20 feet away. No need to get your hands dirty, not yet anyway. So the man had a name. Jasper filed it away. He also filed away the fact that Cora, the woman who sold him candy and ammunition, knew the city killer by name and wasn't the least bit afraid of him. This doesn't concern you, Cora, Noah shot back. But the smooth control in his voice was gone, replaced by a hard, angry edge. The boy and I are just discussing a little family history. Cora swung herself out of the saddle with a practiced grace that spoke of a life spent on horseback. She looked older up close, her face a roadmap of desert sun and hard-won wisdom. Ed Hollister's family history is my concern, she said, her voice like flint. Has been for 37 years. The world seemed to tilt under Jasper's feet. Another one. Another person who knew. How deep did this go? How many people in his quiet little town were tangled up in this web of murder and secrets? You were supposed to stay out of this, the second man snarled. That was the deal. The deal, Cora snapped back, her eyes blazing, was that I'd stay quiet as long as Ed was alive and his family was left alone. You broke that deal when you put your hands on him. Ed's gone now. That changes everything. She looked directly at Jasper, her gaze sharp enough to cut glass. You found the mine, boy. You found what they did to my father. Jasper's mind reeled. Cora's father, one of the 7 skeletons. She's filling your head with nonsense, Noah warned, his voice rising. Old grudges and half-truths. Half-truths? Cora let out a harsh, bitter laugh. I was there that night, Noah. I was just a girl hiding in the rocks, watching. I saw you and your father drag those men out of that mine. I saw you execute them one by one and drag them right back down into that hole to be forgotten. The camera in Jasper's hands suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. This wasn't just a story. It was real. 7 men, including this woman's father, murdered and staged like a grotesque art exhibit. And he was holding the only proof. What did they find? Jasper asked, his voice hoarse. What was worth killing 7 men for? It wasn't what they found, Cora said, her eyes never leaving Noah's. It's what they were looking for. Your great-grandfather wasn't just a miner boy. He was a territorial surveyor. He mapped every inch of this land, from here to the Colorado River. Every water source, every mineral deposit. He documented who owned what, and more importantly, how they got it. Noah's jaw was clenched so tight Jasper could see the muscles twitching in his cheek. Ancient history. The claims of dead men. Dead men don't have claims, Cora agreed, her voice dropping to a deadly quiet. But their living descendants do. And those original survey maps prove that half the ranches in this county, including some of the most powerful families in the territory, are built on stolen land. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. Jasper could hear nothing but the wind and the frantic beating of his own heart. The secret wasn't just murder. It was the theft of an entire region. Finally, Noah spoke, his voice stripped of all pretense. The boy doesn't leave here with that camera. Cora's hand moved like a snake, wrapping around the stock of the rifle strapped to her saddle. The camera leaves with the boy, Noah, just like we agreed. Agreed? Jasper stared at her, his head spinning. You planned this? Your grandfather was dying, son, Cora said, her voice softening slightly, though her eyes were still locked on Noah. The cancer was eating him from the inside out. He knew he didn't have long, and he knew these vultures would come circling the second the dirt was on his coffin. He came to me a month ago. Noah's men began to spread out, a subtle, practiced movement. They were flanking them. Cora adjusted her position, keeping all 3 of them in her line of sight. Ed was trapped, she continued. They forced him to make that map for you as a final test of his loyalty. He was supposed to lead you to them so they could gauge your character, see if you could be bought or intimidated into silence like he was. But he left a flaw in it, a tiny detail only I would recognize. He wasn't leading you into a trap. He was sending you to me. The truth hit Jasper with the force of a physical blow, the strange directions that looped back on themselves. They weren't a mistake. They pointed toward Cora's general store. His grandfather hadn't betrayed him. He'd been trying to save him. You've stumbled into a war that's been going on for generations, boy, Cora said. A war over land, water, and power. When your great-grandfather Samuel finished his survey, he knew what he had. He had proof of the biggest land grab in the history of the West. He hid his maps and his ledgers before they could get to him. Enough! Noah roared, his patience finally snapping. The boy gives us the camera and the map, and this ends now. Like it ended for my father, Cora challenged, her voice dripping with venom. Your father got greedy, Noah spat. He and his men were hired to look for copper, but they stumbled onto one of Samuel's hidden caches, the real maps. Instead of turning them over like they were paid to, they tried to blackmail my father. They made a bad business decision. So you murdered them, Jasper said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. I protected my family's interests. Noah's mask of civility was gone, revealing the cold, ruthless killer beneath. Just like I'm prepared to do right now. Cora smoothly drew her rifle from its scabbard. The click of the hammer being pulled back was deafeningly loud in the tense silence. The difference is, this time you don't have the element of surprise. This time, people know where the boy is. Noah laughed, a truly ugly sound. Do they? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like young Jasper snuck off from his chores without telling a soul. Tragic accidents happen all the time in the desert. People get lost, minds collapse. The threat was clear. He wouldn't just be a body, he would be a ghost story, a cautionary tale. His mother would wait for him day after day, never knowing what had truly happened, just like Cora had waited for her father. "There's something else you need to know, boy," Cora said, her voice tight with a rage that had been simmering for nearly 4 decades. "Those documents your great-grandfather hid, they don't just prove land theft, they prove murder, the systematic extermination of any family that wouldn't sell their land or their water rights." Jasper felt a wave of nausea. "How many?" 17 families. Cora's voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of a gravestone. 63 people. Men, women, children, all of them officially listed as victims of accidents or Indian raids, or simply wandered off into the desert and were never seen again. Noah's face contorted into a mask of pure fury. "You self-righteous witch! You think digging up old graves will bring back the dead? You think your petty justice is more important than the stability of this entire territory?" "I think," Cora said, leveling the rifle at his chest, "that some secrets are too heavy for the living to carry." As if on cue, the wind picked up, swirling dust around their feet. The sky to the west was turning a bruised purple. A storm was coming, and somewhere in Noah's pocket was a metal tag, cold and sharp, with Jasper's name on it, waiting to claim him. The first fat drops of rain splattered in the dust, each one landing with a small hiss. The sky was darkening fast, the pleasant afternoon transforming into something menacing. Jasper watched Noah's men glance nervously at the bruised-looking clouds gathering overhead. A real desert squall could turn this entire landscape into a muddy, impassable trap. "You can't protect him forever, Cora," Noah shouted over the rising wind. "Even if you get him out of here today, then what? You think he can hide from us? You think his mother is safe?" The mention of his mother sent a spike of pure ice through Jasper's veins. "Leave her out of this." "She's already in it, boy," Noah shot back, a triumphant sneer on his face. "She's been in it since the day she married a Hollister. Every acre of that ranch you call home, every drop of water that keeps your cattle from turning to dust. It all exists because your grandfather kept his mouth shut, because certain documents stayed buried." Cora's jaw was a hard line. "Tell him the rest, Noah. Go on. Tell him why his family's ranch is the key to this whole rotten business." "What is she talking about?" Jasper demanded, looking from Cora's grim face to Noah's sudden hesitation. For the first time, Noah looked uncertain. He was weighing his options, and Jasper realized with a sickening lurch that he was calculating whether Jasper would live long enough for the truth to matter. "Your family's ranch," Cora said, when it was clear Noah wouldn't speak, "sits directly on top of the largest underground spring in this territory, the Bonita Aquifer. Your great-grandfather Samuel's maps show its exact location, its flow rate, everything. That water, boy, it's worth more than all the gold and silver ever pulled out of these hills combined." Lightning spiderwebbed across the sky, followed by a low, rumbling growl of thunder. The horses strained against their tethers, their eyes wide with fear. "The families," Jasper said, the horrifying pieces clicking into place. "The 17 families that were murdered. They all had land with water rights." "Smart boy," Noah's voice was laced with a grudging respect. "Water is the only thing that matters in this country. It's power. Those dirt-poor farmers were sitting on liquid gold and were too ignorant to even know it." "So you killed them," Jasper stated, the accusation flat and cold. "You killed them all and took their land." "I acquired legally abandoned properties through the proper government channels," Noah corrected him, his voice oozing false legitimacy. The fact that the previous owners had met with a series of unfortunate and entirely unrelated accidents was simply a matter of good timing. 63 people, Cora raised her rifle slightly, including 12 children under the age of 10. "You call that good timing?" "I call it business," Noah said, his voice as cold as a winter night. "Nothing personal?" The rain was coming down hard now, a torrential downpour that turned the dust to a thick, slick mud. Jasper knew this storm wasn't just a change in the weather, it was a shift in power. In this deluge, visibility would be near zero. The slick ground would make a fast escape on horseback impossible. It was an equalizer. "There's something else," Cora shouted, her voice nearly lost in the roar of the wind and rain. "Something Ed told me, about the documents." "What?" Jasper yelled back. "They're not just in one place." Samuel was paranoid, but he was brilliant. He made 3 complete sets of his maps and ledgers. He hid them in 3 different locations. Insurance. Noah went absolutely still, the rain plastering his dark hair to his skull. Even from a distance, Jasper could see the raw fury in his eyes. "Where?" Noah demanded, his voice a low growl. Cora gave a grim, tight-lipped smile. Ed only knew the location of one of them, but he said that if anything ever happened to him, his grandson would be able to find the other 2. "How?" Noah roared. "Because Samuel wasn't hiding them from his family," Cora yelled, looking directly at Jasper. "He was hiding them for his family. He hid the clues in plain sight, things a Hollister would see every single day, but an outsider would never even notice." The storm was reaching its peak. One of Noah's men, clearly spooked, shouted something to his boss. "We need to get to shelter." Noah's hand went to his gun. "Then we end this now." But as Noah's pistol cleared his coat, Jasper made a choice. It wasn't brave. It wasn't smart. It was pure animal instinct. He turned and ran, not away into the open desert, but back toward the one place he knew they'd follow. He ran straight for the dark, gaping mouth of the mine. Jasper's boots skidded on the wet, muddy slope as he plunged back into the darkness of the mine. Behind him, he heard Noah screaming curses, his words swallowed by a clap of thunder. A gunshot cracked, the sound sharp and angry, echoing off the canyon walls. He didn't know if they were shooting at him or at Cora, and he didn't dare look back to find out. The mine was a different beast in the storm. Water streamed from the ceiling, turning the floor into a slick, treacherous river of mud. The air, once thick with the smell of decay, now smelled of wet earth and ozone. His flashlight beam, already weak, danced crazily across the smooth walls as he ran deeper, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He passed the 7 skeletons, their silent, grinning skulls seeming to watch him, judging him as he fled past. "Boy!" Cora's voice echoed from the mine entrance, surprisingly close. 30 feet in. There's a side passage on your left. Look for the mismatched stones." He saw it just as he heard the heavy thud of boots splashing through the mud behind him. It was a narrow crack, barely wide enough for a man to squeeze through, partially hidden by a rockfall that looked almost natural. He threw himself into the opening, scraping his shoulders on the rough stone. The passage angled sharply upward, away from the main tunnel. He could hear Noah's men in the main tunnel now, their voices angry and confused. The narrow passage opened up into a small, dry chamber he had completely missed on his first trip. He swung his flashlight around, and the breath caught in his throat. The walls of the chamber were covered in carvings, not random scratches or graffiti. These were deliberate, precise markings, maps, diagrams of water flows. And in the very center of the chamber, sitting on a natural stone pedestal and wrapped in oilcloth, was a heavy wooden crate. Samuel was a thorough man. Cora's voice came from right behind him. She squeezed through the opening, her rifle held at the ready, her breath coming in ragged gas. He carved backup copies of his most important maps right into the rock wall. "How did you know about this place?" Jasper asked, his voice full of awe. "Ed brought me here once, a long time ago, after my father. After that night, he swore me to secrecy. He wanted me to know that the proof was safe." She nodded toward the crate. "Go on, open it." With trembling hands, Jasper lifted the heavy oilcloth. The crate wasn't locked. He lifted the lid. Inside, protected from the damp, were stacks upon stacks of paper, all covered in his great-grandfather's meticulous, elegant handwriting. Survey maps far more detailed than anything the territorial government had. Land deeds with notations in the margins detailing threats and coercion. Water rights documentation, and something else. Something that made his blood run even colder. Photographs, dozens of them. Old tintypes of families posed proudly in front of their small ranches and homesteads. Men, women, and children, their faces full of hope, squinting into the sun. On the back of each photograph, Samuel had carefully written their names and the date. The families, Jasper whispered in horror. The 17 families. Samuel knew what was coming, Cora said, her voice thick with emotion. He knew he couldn't stop them, not by himself, so he did the only thing he could. He became a witness. He made sure that if they couldn't have justice, they would at least not be forgotten. She moved to the entrance of the chamber, peering back down the narrow passage. But that's not all. Look at the very bottom of the crate. Beneath the last stack of papers was another bundle wrapped in oilcloth. Jasper carefully unwrapped it. It was a thick, leather-bound journal. He opened it. It was filled with his great-grandfather's writing, but this wasn't about maps or surveys. This was a record of meetings, conversations he'd overheard, payments he'd witnessed, names, dates, amounts of money exchanged for silence, for false testimony, for a blind eye. Noah Gentry's father isn't the only name in there, Jasper realized, his eyes scanning the pages. The bank president, the territorial judge, even the sheriff. Still the sheriff, Cora finished for him, her voice grim. Sheriff Miller. His father was the sheriff back then, too. It's a family business. The whole rotten conspiracy is hereditary. They pass it down, father to son, like a family heirloom. The sound of footsteps echoed from the main tunnel, louder now, more urgent. They're getting closer, Cora said, her face set. They must have found the passage. Time to go, she said, grabbing a handful of the most important-looking documents from the crate. There's another way out. Through the back of this chamber. It leads into a natural cave system. Comes out on the north ridge, near the old water tower. What about all this? Jasper asked, gesturing to the crate overflowing with evidence. Take what you can carry, Cora instructed, stuffing papers into her own jacket. Samuel was smarter than they'll ever be. He knew they might find one cache. That's why he made 3. Where's the third one? Jasper asked as they scrambled toward a dark opening at the back of the chamber. As they plunged into the new tunnel, leaving Noah's angry shouts behind them, Cora glanced back at him, a flicker of a smile on her lips. Your family cemetery, boy. Samuel Wilde's headstone isn't just a memorial, it's a map, and the symbols carved into its base are the key. The natural cave system was a claustrophobic maze. They navigated by the fading beam of Jasper's flashlight, slipping on wet rocks and squeezing through narrow passages. The roar of the storm was a distant, muted thunder now, a reminder of the danger they had left behind, and the danger that was surely still waiting for them. How much farther? Jasper whispered, clutching the precious bundle of documents to his chest like a shield. We're almost there, Cora replied, her voice steady and calm. We're right under the old water tower now. The cemetery is just over the next ridge. They emerged into a world washed clean by the storm. The rain had stopped, and the gray afternoon light was slowly breaking apart as the sun began its descent. On a small windswept hill overlooking his family's ranch stood the Wild family cemetery. Its old, weathered headstones were arranged in neat, silent rows. And in the very center, taller and more ornate than the rest, was the granite monument of his great-grandfather, Samuel Wilde. Its surface was covered in intricate, swirling symbols that Jasper had seen 1,000 times, but had never truly looked at. There, Cora said, pointing, the symbols around the base. They match the ones on the paper Ed left you. Jasper fell to his knees beside the cold, wet stone, running his fingers over the carvings. They weren't just decorative patterns. They were directions, compass headings, measurements in paces, crude drawings of landmarks. His great-grandfather, a man he had never known, had turned his own gravestone into the final piece of his puzzle. 12 paces east, to the ancient oak, Jasper read aloud, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and excitement. Then north 20 paces, to where the morning shadow of the angel falls. They found the spot with surprising ease. A large flat stone lay at the base of the gnarled oak tree. It took both of them to pry it loose. Underneath, nestled in a hollowed-out space and wrapped in thick, waxed oilcloth, was another cache of documents. But these were different. These weren't maps or photographs. These were legal papers, signed affidavits from men who had been threatened, a sworn confession from a bank teller detailing laundered money, and a series of letters written in a bold, authoritative hand, signed by Noah Gentry's father. This is it, Jasper breathed, holding up a letter that explicitly detailed the plan to eliminate the 7 miners. This is everything. This could hang them all. It could have, a familiar voice said from behind them. They spun around. Standing at the wrought iron gate of the cemetery, his expensive suit now torn and caked with mud, was Noah Gentry. He was alone, but he held a pistol in his hand, and it was aimed directly at Jasper's chest. "You are a persistent young man," Noah said, walking slowly toward them, his steps weaving between the old headstones. "I'll give you that. But this ends here, in a graveyard. How very fitting." "Where are your men?" Cora asked, her hands slowly moving toward the rifle still slung over her shoulder. "I sent them back to town," Noah said, his voice weary, almost resigned. "Some tasks are better handled personally." He stopped about 20 feet away, the gun held steady. "You know I never wanted any of this to fall on you, boy. Your grandfather was a good man. He just couldn't leave well enough alone." "Like his grandson," Cora observed, her body tense as a coiled spring. "Exactly," Noah said, his gaze fixed on Jasper. "You found what you were looking for. Now the only question that matters is, what are you going to do with it?" Jasper looked down at the damning evidence in his hands. The names, the dates, the proof of dozens of murders that spanned decades. Proof that could shatter the powerful families who ran the territory like their own private kingdom. But a terrible thought crept into his mind. Exposing this wouldn't just destroy them. It would destroy everything his own family had built. His mother's ranch, their water rights. It was all tied to the original sin. Exposing the truth would mean his mother would lose everything. Noah saw the conflict in his eyes. "You're seeing the whole picture now, aren't you, boy?" he said softly, his voice dangerously persuasive. "You release those papers, and what happens? Chaos. The territorial government seizes half the land in the county, your mother's ranch included. You and she will be left with nothing but a pile of old paper and the cold comfort of righteousness. Is that what you want?" He let the question hang in the silent air of the cemetery. "Or," he continued, "you hand them over to me. You go home. Your family prospers. The ranch remains secure. You live a long, comfortable life, built on a history that is best left forgotten." It was the same choice his grandfather had been given, the same devil's bargain that had slowly eaten away at Ed's soul for 37 long years. The silence or the truth, ruin or prosperity. "There's a third option," Cora said suddenly, her voice cutting through the tension. Both Noah and Jasper looked at her surprised. "What if some of these documents," she said, her eyes glinting, "were to get misplaced? What if only certain names came to light? The names of men who are already dead. Crimes that can't be prosecuted today. What if the truth was used not for revenge, but for justice? A proper burial for the dead. Acknowledgement for the families who lost everything." Noah's eyes narrowed. "You're proposing a selective truth." "I'm proposing a future," Cora countered. "Justice for the dead and mercy for the living." The wind had died down completely. In the eerie silence, Jasper could hear his own heart beating. He could hear the faint, distant sound of his mother calling his name from the ranch house down in the valley. He looked at the papers in his hands. He looked at the headstone of the great-grandfather who had laid this burden at his feet. He looked at Noah, the man who would kill him without a second thought. And he looked at Cora, the woman whose entire life had been defined by the secret he now held. 63 people murdered, 17 families destroyed, his own family living on the spoils. He finally knew what he had to do. "I know what I'm going to do," Jasper said, his voice quiet but firm. He walked over to Samuel Wilde's grave and carefully placed the bundle of documents at the base of the headstone. Then he reached into his pocket, pulled out the camera, and opened the back, exposing the film to the fading daylight and erasing the images of the 7 skeletons forever. Noah and Cora both stared at him, stunned into silence. "The 7 men in that mine get a proper burial," Jasper announced, his voice ringing with an authority he didn't know he possessed. "Their names get cleared. Their families are told the truth of what happened to them. Sheriff Miller gets a package, an anonymous package. It will contain enough evidence to prove that his father and your father, Noah, were directly responsible for those 7 murders. enough for him to understand the legacy he's inherited. Noah tensed, his knuckles white around the grip of his pistol. And the rest of it? The land deals? The other accidents? Jasper looked him dead in the eye. That stays buried, but on one condition. What condition? Noah's voice was a strained whisper. Every single one of the 17 families who lost their land gets restitution. You will set up an anonymous trust. You will fund it. Enough for their descendants to buy new land to start over. Clean money, not blood money. Jasper's voice grew stronger with every word. And you will disappear. You will sell your assets. You will leave this territory, and you will never, ever come back. If I ever see your face again, or hear your name, the rest of these papers go directly to the U.S. Marshals. And if I refuse, Noah breathed. Then you can explain this letter to them, Jasper said, pulling a sealed envelope from his inner pocket. My grandfather was a smart man. He wrote this before you got to him. It's a confession, his confession, detailing everything he knew. He gave it to me and told me to mail it if he died suddenly. It went in the mail this morning. The only thing that will stop the marshals from opening it is a telegram from me tomorrow morning, telling them it was all a mistake. Checkmate. Cora smiled, a real, genuine smile for the first time. The boy thinks like his great-grandfather. Noah stared at Jasper for a long, silent moment. The sun had dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and blood red. He was weighing his life, his fortune, his entire legacy against the word of a boy standing in a graveyard. Finally, with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of 37 years of secrets, he lowered his weapon. The families will be compensated, he said, the words tasting like defeat. You have my word. Your word is worthless, Jasper replied coldly, but your signature on a legally binding document, witnessed by Miss Lane here, might just be enough. Under the twilight sky, among the ghosts of his ancestors, Jasper Wilde negotiated the end of a war. Noah, a man used to giving orders, now took them, signing away a portion of his fortune to atone for the sins of his father. He signed papers that transferred ownership of his assets, establishing a trust fund for the descendants of the murdered families. In return for their future, Jasper agreed to bury their past. As the last light faded, Noah climbed onto his horse. You're making a mistake, boy, he said, his voice hollow. Some secrets are too dangerous to keep. And some are too dangerous to reveal, Jasper replied, the weight of his choice settling upon him. My great-grandfather learned that. My grandfather learned that. Now it's my turn. Noah turned his horse and rode away into the darkness, a ghost fading back into the history he had tried so hard to control. Jasper never saw him again. 3 days later, an anonymous tip led Sheriff Miller to the abandoned mine. The remains of the 7 miners were recovered. The official story, shaped by carefully leaked documents, was that they had been victims of a terrible mining accident, one that was covered up by a corrupt foreman and a long-dead corporate official. The case was officially closed. The 7 men were buried in the town cemetery under proper headstones with their real names carved into the granite. Cora Lane stood at her father's grave, her face unreadable, as the final handful of dirt was thrown. Over the next year, families across the territory began receiving mysterious windfalls from an anonymous benefactor in the East. Families who had struggled for generations suddenly had enough to buy new land, to build new lives. No one ever knew where the money came from. Jasper took the iron-bound ledger, the photographs, and his grandfather's final letter, and sealed them in a metal box. He buried it deep beneath Samuel Wilde's headstone, a time capsule of truth and pain. He had learned that justice wasn't always about shouting the truth from the rooftops. Sometimes it was about quiet actions. Sometimes it was about trading vengeance for peace. The water continued to flow deep beneath his family's ranch. His mother never knew how close they had come to losing everything. And in the quiet corners of the county, 17 families finally began to heal. Their suffering finally acknowledged. Their futures finally their own. What Jasper Wilde found in that mine was never fully revealed, but it was never forgotten. He had learned the heaviest lesson of the West, that some secrets are a burden, but others are a shield. And a wise man knows the difference. If you enjoyed this story, there's another video waiting for you on your screen right now. It's an unforgettable tale from the forgotten corners of history where a single choice can change the world in ways you never expected. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a story. Your support helps us keep the campfire burning and the stories coming. Thanks for listening.